Now, the British PhD student Matthew Hedges, who was jailed for spying in the United Arab Emirates, has arrived back in the UK.
He was given a life sentence last week, but was pardoned yesterday after intervention by the Foreign Secretary.
Joining us from central London is Andreas Krieg, a colleague of Matthew Hedges, assistant professor at the Defence Studies Department of King's College London as well. Andreas, welcome to you. We want to make clear, you've never met Matthew, but you have communicated with him via email, etc., and, you know, working for the same institution partly. How taken aback have you been by recent events? What can you tell us about him?
Well, we're a very small Gulf studies community internationally, so naturally everybody somewhat knows everyone. And that's why it even hits closer to home than for many other people, because, you know, I myself focus a lot on the Gulf. And what happened to Matthew is something that could happen to any of us. And that is quite an alarming development, because we had in the past, you know, people have been detained or have been sent outside the country. People have been denied entry to going into some of these Gulf countries, including the UAE. But we've never had a case where a British citizen, as an academic, was detained in solitary confinement for months on end and then was sentenced to life imprisonment. That is something that is very worrying, and I think will raise a lot of questions for academic institutions, think tanks, journalists, anyone in civil society that wants to operate or work in the UAE. And the recommendation is try to stay away from it as much as you can.
If it has a chilling effect on the academy, on academia, that may be no bad thing. I mean, why should we be studying and researching a society which clearly, in terms of its judicial system, has many flaws?
Well, it's not about studying UAE society. What Matthew was studying is more the UAE's role in the wider Arab world, particularly the UAE's policy in Yemen, anything to do with the Middle East, and that is a huge security concern for any of us in the Western world, especially in Britain as well. Everybody who's researching the Middle East these days can't get away from or can't avoid researching what the UAE are doing. They're involved in Libya, they're involved in Egypt, they're involved in Yemen, they're involved in the Horn of Africa. They are quite a big player. So I think we all somewhat have to touch on what's going on in the UAE. And the UAE are trying to market themselves as a liberal country, but clearly they are not. And a lot of conferences are being held in the UAE where people are being invited. And it's becoming increasingly dangerous for academics to go there. So this research of how the UAE is dealing with the Middle East is something that has security implications for us in the Western world, because we need to understand what the UAE is doing and whether the UAE is actually a viable partner for Western governments in the Arab world. And that is something that researchers are on the forefront of finding out.
What do you say, Andreas, to the UAE's contention that Mr. Hedges was not completely and wholly an academic? He was spying.
Well, I mean, this is a ludicrous, completely ridiculous argument. There's no evidence for it. Matt, from everything I know, knowing how we as academics work, is not working as an operative for any foreign government, definitely not for the UK, not for an intelligence service.
Is there never any overlap? And I'm not making any reference here at all to the Matthew Hedges case, but is it not the case that actually, when it comes to espionage, it's not binary, it's not black and white, it's a sliding scale. And sometimes, for instance, a journalist who's on a story will get a call asking for information. The idea that you are either simply a spy or not a spy isn't accurate.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's blurry, but here's the thing: espionage and spy is a narrative. It's a label that you put on someone if you want to delegitimize them. And the UAE have a long track record of putting labels on people, calling them either terrorists or calling them spies in order to silence them. We have to understand that the UAE is on somewhat of a vendetta post-Arab Spring, trying to silence civil society. They don't want certain information about their country and their foreign policy to leak to the open. So by putting a spy label on someone, just because you might have consulted or interacted with government bodies, as we all do, you know, I mean, I'm based in London. I do a lot of work on the Middle East, and I speak to diplomats and I do speak to government officials because that's part of our job. We're policy-oriented researchers, but that is not spying. But if you share information information, you're not a spy. And I think this label is something, obviously, it's not black and white, but putting that label on someone, you're basically implying, and the UAE have gone even further, they've actually said he's a captain in the MI6, which is completely made up. Any confession that was extracted from Matt was extracted under absolutely horrendous conditions, and that has to be borne in mind when we think about the spy label. The spy label is something that there is absolutely no evidence, you don't need any evidence for it to put it on someone.
Andreas Krieg is a colleague of Matthew Hedges, an assistant professor at the Defence Studies Department of King's College London. Andreas, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.